Black women healing together. Today, we are going to talk about the power of Black women healing in community. If you are looking for community or you just want to celebrate and uplift Black women for the community that we are creating to heal together, this is a discussion for you. So, my name is Camesha. I am a licensed clinical social worker, recovering workaholic, and burnout overcomer. Moving Beyond Burnout empowers Black women to cultivate self awareness and to create practical pathways to overcome burnout for good. So, if you're joining me for the first time, please like the video, please share the video, and subscribe to the newsletter and also the YouTube channel. And so today I am joined by Marissa Price from Marissa Price Heals. And we are going to just dive into how Black women are healing together, what we are seeing across the board in terms of the different ways that people are intentionally building community, especially during this critical time. So I will let Marissa just really introduce yourself. And can you tell us about like your journey to healing collectively with Black women and maybe how that's changed or evolved over time?
Yeah, so my name is Marissa Price. I am a social worker, I'm a healer, I'm a freelance educator, specifically for Black women. And yeah, my healing journey really started on, I feel like YouTube, right? So, in the process of healing from a very toxic work experience, kind of just started sharing my journey on YouTube after being in a community called The Garden, created by Alicia Renice on YouTube. But yeah, that community of Black women really inspired me to share my own journey, the really raw process of healing, processing what had happened right after I had put so much effort, so much work, so much education into this career path, and for it to just go a way that I never expected. And so the power of healing, like publicly on YouTube, was that other people, other Black women specifically, were drawn to the videos that I was creating. And as they were commenting on my videos and like sharing in the live chats, it was also healing me at the same time, right? There's a special like thing that happens when you're able to share out loud what has happened to you. It kind of disintegrates the shame around something that you may be carrying inside. Um, and so, yeah, YouTube has really been like the catalyst for this. I do have a master's degree in social work, so having the background in understanding different theories, right, healing modalities as a social worker has helped me as well. But I really feel like it's been my lived experience, just navigating this world, toxic institutions, right? And you said, like, at this moment, we're seeing so many things happen that community is essential to be able to connect with other people who are experiencing what you're experiencing, so that you can eliminate those feelings of self gaslighting, right? That, oh, it isn't this bad. Or when you're able to connect, especially with other communities of Black women sharing, like, oh, I'm scared too. I have different like things that I'm dealing with mental health wise. It does something like really magical in that it connects you with each other and lets you know that you're not alone and you're not isolated, even though it feels like that sometimes. So yeah, that's kind of been my journey over time. Having a master's degree in social work, right? Having the basis in formal education, but then my lived experience really being like the catalyst to healing collectively. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And there's something about what you said about bringing visibility to what you're experiencing and sharing publicly, whether like YouTube, isn't always a place that people think about where you can build community, but you have done that and you were, it seemed like, ushered into talking publicly about your experiences by another Black woman, who created a space, which is amazing, right? And so it really talks about the how us being public and sharing and literally creating spaces, whether they're online or in person, gives empowerment to others to do the same, which is amazing, which is really, really
Yes.
amazing. And also, just like what you said around community is essential. And one of the things that I have really been thinking about is how, um, for African Americans, we have always had a collectivist culture. We know that we are all
Hmm.
that. But in this period of time where things that we may have been comfortable with are falling. And we
Yeah.
have to move out of individualism into collectivism, again, embracing that value because
Yes.
we will not be able to survive. And so, like, I'm hoping that this sticks, right? And that all of us talking about community, that we just keep it going, not just when things are hard, right?
Hmm.
Um, it is kind of like one thing that I have just been noticing. But why do you think, we talked about the moment that we're in right now, but we also have this history of Black women healing in community. But why do you think it's so imperative right now for Black women to heal together?
Hmm. I think we have a lot of different forces that are now out in the open against us, right? We have experienced this, for as long as I can remember, and a lot of it has been undercover. I know, especially for our generation, right? A lot of the things that we were taught were in the past, we experienced. And so it was kind of disorienting, right? To hear the messages that this was in the past, but we're still experiencing it in the present because it was undercover. But now it's out in the open once again. And so it's really important to be able to have safe spaces where you're able to share this is what's happening, right? I'm not gaslighting myself because that can be a thought pattern that you may fall into when you don't have that community space to be able to reflect back to each other, right? No, you're not imagining this. No, you're not making too big of a deal about this. This is real. This is scary, and this is impacting a lot of us. And community does something really powerful with that. So safe spaces are critical. And like you said, moving back to a community focused culture, because the message for a long time has been individualistic, right? If I have it and I'm good, then that's all I need. Um, and to your point, we can't survive like that, especially during these times. The forces are getting stronger against us, and a way over time, right? I've been like reading works from Black women in the past, right? The early 1900s, to get knowledge that they left us with. How do you navigate times like these? And community is essential to be able to have groups, safe spaces to resist against the forces that are growing stronger, getting more out in the open. And we have to form like a resistance against that with each other, right? So it's very imperative. Resisting isolation, I think, especially like after the pandemic, right? The pandemic just had so many of us in isolation, feeling like it was just us going through this thing. And so reestablishing those connections post pandemic, connecting with each other with the forces that we see against us is really essential, right? There's no other route to survive times like this. It really does come down to community and creating safe spaces and networks, just as has been done all throughout history with Black women leading a lot of these initiatives and things like this. So it's very important.
Mhm. And what are some of the things that you've learned from going back in time and reading different works and studying history? Like, what are some of the ways that Black women have been able to persevere in times that were very similar to what we're going through right now?
Hmm. I think one of the themes is like knowing that this is not all there is, right? That's a message that we're told so often that we just have to accept the status quo. And going back and reading people's narratives, right, who survived enslavement, who survived different forms of oppression, right, violence. There was something within them that knew that this is not all there is, and that they were not put here to experience oppression like all these things that we're experiencing. And so knowing that there is a different way, in tapping into the power of your imagination to envision that way forward, because even if you can't see it right in your immediate environment, if you're able to get into community with other people who activate your imagination, it makes you realize, right, that there's something more to this than what we're experiencing. And that we have so much power within us, right? Which is why there are all these efforts to try
Mhm.
to strip our power from us. Because we are such powerful people and we have such, our roots, right, go very deep into the earth, right? And so it's important to be able to tap into ancestral wisdom, especially during this time, um, because it didn't go anywhere. It still lives within us. Tapping back into memories. What did past generations go through? How did they navigate these times? And how can we get back to a community focused way of living versus the message of individualism, right? If I have it, then I'm good, and not really worrying about the people next to you. Unlearning that idea because it's essential. And I think like reading the narratives of Black women over time, right, from centuries past, has really reminded me of that. Community is just non negotiable during times like this.
Mhm. Yeah. And what you talked about was a sense of hope, imagination, and reliance, right? So, like building networks to be able to um, know, whose gifts, whose talents, whose connections. Also, being able to actually envision that our lives, we were not designed to live through this, right? And that these are things that are happening. It's a concerted effort. And like you said, why would they go this far, right? Like, why
Mm-hmm.
would people, in positions of power go this far to make sure that we don't even that we can't even have an
Mm-hmm.
ounce of what
Yeah.
they may have in terms of power. And then also like believing in yourself, like believing in who you are, like your power, your wisdom, finding value outside of what the the mainstream culture may say is value.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate you bringing up those things. And I've talked a lot to my grandmother, who is, I think she'll be 89 in May. So shout out to Grammy. And she grew up in DC, segregated, segregated Washington, DC. People forget that Washington, DC was segregated. It was, y'all, if you didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked her, like, growing up in the 40s, in the 50s, like how did you sustain yourself? She said, we believed in our inherent value, and we created a world in a space outside of white dominant culture where we could
Yes.
thrive, right? And so I think about Black women healing together, and what you talked about is literally creating those spaces where we can thrive is a part
Mm-hmm.
of how we resist and a part of how we sustain ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, because the narrative for so long has been you have to seek approval. And I just spoke about this the other day, but that you have to constantly seek approval from people who will never get you. Right. And it's just become clear as day during these times over the past like less than 2 months at this point, that those folks are never going to get what we're doing. And that's okay. Right. We don't need their approval because we've proven over centuries that we can create our own spaces where we validate each other, where we affirm our worth, where we're able to put the pieces back together that they often try to destroy within us, especially in toxic workplaces, as I talk about on my channel.
Hmm. Absolutely right. Yep, we have value, and we don't have to fit into boxes or
Yeah.
other people's, standards. And that's what I love about what you're doing in terms of helping Black women get free. How can we experience liberation? So tell me more about what you're doing with Marissa Price Heals. Tell me about your approach to healing, liberation, and fostering a transformative healing for Black women in community.
Yeah. So Marissa Price Heals is my YouTube channel. And it's a safe space for Black women to share our experiences, to share our stories, our resources, our knowledge with each other, and heal in community. So I have incredible guests that I have on that have shared life experiences that have changed me, that have altered my life path, right? Just the knowledge and wisdom, because that's another thing, right? Generational knowledge, it has been lost, right? As we have seen, like over the past decades, and really like reforming those ties is so important to be able to share knowledge through generations so that we know what to expect, so that we know what's coming, so that we don't have to go through it ourselves and just try to figure it out piece by piece. And that has been a beautiful part of my channel. Just having incredible guests on, like I said, sharing their stories, sharing how they got from point A to point B, so that we have the roadmap, right? If we're out here trying to like figure it out by ourselves, sometimes that can be a lot. It can be exhausting. It can stymie our progress. And so having stories to be able to attach, okay, this is the roadmap that this person followed. Let me try that. I might have to take my own path, but at least I have the steps to follow, right? If I need to fall back on those. So that has been beautiful. But my approach to healing is one of liberation and decolonial healing. So, again, being formally educated in social work, I feel like a huge piece that was missing was healing from my education. So learning the theories, learning like the textbook things, and then you got out into communities, and it didn't fit sometimes. So having like just lived experiences that people shared with me, and being able to learn from that, and also using my intuitive gifts as a healer, because I feel like a lot of us come into healing spaces, social work, right, mental health field with inherent gifts that attract us to this field in the first place. So I'm trying to tap into that. What attracted me to this field versus the formal education part, which is important, right? Which I utilize too. But there was something that drew me to this field. And yeah, my ancestral gifts has been a huge part of healing and liberation, and a focus on my channel. How can we get back the knowledge that we had prior to colonization, prior to enslavement, thousands of years of knowledge that still exists within us, and bring that to the forefront during this really important, critical time in history?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate what you have shared about our gifts, right? And our ancestral wisdom and the things that have been a part of us, and really that being a part of our liberation and a part of how we can enhance and build community, is tapping back into those things. What are some of the gifts that you've discovered about yourself? Um, I'm a fellow social worker as well, right? And there are certain gifts, like you said, that have attracted us to our work. But if you could maybe just share maybe one or two gifts that you have really embraced.
Oh, that's a great. I've never been asked that question. Thank you. I think, yeah, I'm a really good listener. So I'm very introspective. Somebody just shared this with me the other day. I am very introspective. So I will be observing like 360 degrees around me at all time. And I may not be saying anything, so people can perceive that as, oh, she's just quiet. But I'm actually like perceiving everything in my environment, making notes, right? And that's very important when you're working with someone, you're helping them to heal themselves, getting information, giving them exercises that may apply to their lives that they can implement. So, yeah, I'm a really good listener. And I think demonstrating that through my interviews as well, which I've heard feedback from, which is another great thing about YouTube. You receive feedback from your community about your gifts. If you're struggling to identify them, maybe like rebuilding your identity after a really traumatic experience, your community, especially on YouTube, will reflect back to you the things that you're really good at. And one of those things is empathetic listening. I think community building as well. Um, Going through the experience and the job that I was in, thinking that it would be community building, which is my gift and my passion, and it turning out not to be that at all. I feel like I have the opportunity now to do it myself, right? To take the power back and, as a solopreneur now, build community, especially with other Black women who are on a similar healing journey. And that's been really powerful too, just to make connections all throughout the country, all throughout the world, with other Black women who are on the same mission of getting free, liberating ourselves from past traumas.
And what are some of the gems, like from you, building your community on YouTube, and even outside of YouTube? What are some of the gems that you have seen from Black women in these healing spaces?
So I'll say the first is probably that healing is not linear. So a lot of the messages we see, it's like healing has to be the straight line, and you arrive to a destination of healed, which is absolutely not true, right? Healing is a continuous process throughout life. It's ups and downs. Sometimes it can feel like this, right? Like you're going backwards sometimes. And so giving yourself grace, patience during the process of recovering parts of yourself, right, that were often deliberately like stripped from you, it takes a lot of time, right? So giving yourself that time, that patience, that grace, and reminding yourself that it is up and down and you're not doing it wrong. There is no such thing as doing it wrong. Um, if you're evolving into a version of yourself that feels more like you, and you know that feeling when you're living authentically. So healing is not linear. Vulnerability is strength. Vulnerability can be very, very difficult if you have experienced past traumas, right? Especially when we're talking about in the context of community building. It can be difficult to re enter a new community and have a level of vulnerability if you have experienced bullying, right? Trauma in past times. And so being in safe spaces that allow you to be vulnerable and share when you're having a bad day, right? Share when you don't have the answer. We have so much pressure on us to have everything right, perfect, which does not exist, right? And kind of being able to let that go, shed that in safe community and be vulnerable can be very healing as well. Something I've learned. And also to embrace joy, right? Healing does not have to be hard. So healing can look like picking up childhood activities, picking up things that make you smile. Art can be a great way to heal. Things that bring you joy and really like fill your soul are also healing. And it doesn't always have to look like the really hard, tough moments. Yeah, just giving yourself the permission to experience joy along the healing process as well.
And what recommendations or advice would you give to maybe a Black woman who is experiencing loneliness or disconnection from community? Um, what advice would you give them to begin that process of engaging in healing spaces with other Black women?
Mhm. I would say to be intentional. So if you can write a list of intentions, right, with the communities that you're seeking, what do you want this community to feel like? Even based on your past experiences, things that you've encountered that you don't want to encounter in the next space that you go into. So you have a clear roadmap of the spaces that you're wanting to enter, so that you know when you get in it, like you can have a checklist, right? Even a mental checklist. Does this meet, like, am I able to feel safe? Am I able to be vulnerable? Does this feel supportive? And if not, giving yourself permission to pivot out of that community and try a new one. Kind of being a little bit more flexible with the process may be helpful. Um, yeah, knowing that you're worthy, I think is too. Knowing that you're worthy of good community, safe community, people who uplift you, people who support you, who encourage you unconditionally. A lot of us have experienced conditional love and support throughout our lives, and so we've become accustomed to expect that. But affirming to yourself, no, I'm worthy of people who support me, right? Of people who pour into me. Many of us pour into other people so much so that we're depleted at the end of the day. And so telling yourself, no, I deserve that too. The same thing that I give out to other people, I deserve that too. Um, Giving yourself, yeah, like I said, flexibility. Try out a few communities, see how they feel. I think self-awareness is huge, right? To being able to identify the emotions and the feelings that you're experiencing in a certain community versus another one, and giving yourself that room to pivot and take your time, because it's not, there's no rush in this. Like I said, a lot of us are healing from decades of experiences maybe where we have not felt safe in community. And so that process will take time to feel safe enough to open up and know that you're not doing it wrong. That's just part of the process.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I love what you say about being intentional, taking your time, knowing that it's going to be a journey, knowing what works for you, what doesn't work for you. And I also hear a little bit of of being brave, right? Being brave to try a new community. And what I love about Black women is that we do such a good job of creating almost these um, micro communities focused on different issues, different topics. I mean, if we think about everything from political engagement and civic engagement to, you know, wellness, to outdoors, to
Mhm.
running. I mean,
Everything.
walking, everything almost that you could like possibly think of. I believe that there may be a Black woman out there who has created a specific community space that you could plug into. And then also online, like as you shared, I think some people can be like, oh, well, online isn't the same as in person, right? And we know that there are differences, but
Yeah.
engaging online can be the catalyst for building relationships. And I want people who are watching this to know that the foundation of community is relationships. And so you can make relationships, or excuse me, create relationships with other
Mhm.
people online that lead to in person community. Marissa, we met online, right? Like, and now,
Mhm.
you know, we've done a couple of collaborations together, and now we are in community, right? So
Yeah,
I want to uplift that what you engage with online can lead to in person or a stronger online community, right? So
absolutely.
just before we end, if you could tell me some of your favorite Black women community spaces, and this can be across the board, and I'll share some of mine as well.
Yeah. So I mentioned at the top, the garden by Alicia Reedy, so I see in the audience. But yes, a beautiful community. It's on hiatus right now, but for Black women rediscovering their creativity, just essential to my growth and development. As a person, as a creator, as a solopreneur, being able to put out my ideas into the world and knowing that there was a safe circle for me to return to was absolutely essential. So the garden, the Job Liberation Virtual Summit for Black Women, which is coming up. I'm co-hosting with Dr. Kamani, a safe space for Black women to be able to heal from toxic work experiences and plan their exit strategies, because you deserve so much better than toxicity day after day, right? And so that has been a beautiful community, a global community of Black women refusing to stay in toxic work environments and pursuing a different path. The Nap Ministry by Trisha Hersey has been life changing for me. Um, just reading her works, her blogs, her old blog posts, all of her posts just really, it really resonated with me, right? Even back when before I was doing this publicly, it changed something within me just to see like, oh, rest is possible, and being able to like chart that path for my life, after seeing people around me just exhaust themselves, overwork themselves throughout their lives, knowing that I could take a different pathway. And Exodus Summit as well, which is a community led by Stephanie Perry and Rashida Dow, helping Black women travel, move abroad, and take career breaks. I've met so many amazing Black women just charting their own path, traveling the world, globetrotting, things that previously felt like off limits to me. Seeing that, right, I was able to see, oh, I could do that too. And so, yeah, those are some of my favorite communities.
Some of my favorite communities. I was joined this leadership program called Willie's Warriors in Chicago. And it was inspired by Willie T. Barrow, who was a civil rights activist, a Black woman civil rights activist. And the leadership development program is focused on Black women leaders across the city of Chicago. And being a part of Willie's Warriors just really changed my life because these were, you know, women who were intentional about like, we want to create a better life for Black women in the city of Chicago and abroad in whatever industry that we're in. So that has been like such a great program to be a part of. Also, I like Girl Trek, even though I haven't joined Girl Trek,
Yes.
like from a
Yes.
distance, it looks like a phenomenal healing community space for Black women. I also like, of course, therapy for Black girls. I think they've created a great online space. All the active groups like Black Girls Run, Black Girls Jump, like kind of like the active fun. Um, Groups. I love those as well. And then I also, I mean, have to shout out my own organization. I do like what we're creating, Society and
Yes.
Community Care, for Black women to be able to heal. And also one that I want to, I hope that they re-engage in some type of way, but I really like the Win with Black Women that was around
Mm-hmm.
Kamala Harris's campaign, where all these Black women came together. Um, put like to support political candidates, or just like that whole community was amazing to me, like how quickly they got together, got a call, raised money. And I'm like, man, if we could do Win for Black women like across the country, like like in different
Yes.
spheres, like that would be amazing. That would be so amazing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, those are some of like my favorite community spaces. um and so, uh, tell us how people can get connected with you. Tell us how people can plug in to what you have going on. I know you mentioned a couple of things, but I would love for you to kind of expound more on like what you offer.
Yeah, so coming up probably next is the Job Liberation Virtual Summit for Black Women, the second annual, coming up May 16th through 18th, that I'm co hosting with Dr. Kamani of Lifting as We Climb Consulting on YouTube. And this will provide Black women who are either in toxic work environments currently or who are healing from the aftermath with practical healing resources, tips, strategies, how to replace your income, which is a huge fear. And so, yeah, get on the wait list for that. If you go to my YouTube community tab, I have the post for that to get on the wait list. You can go to my website, marissaprice.me, to check out my offerings. I offer healing and liberation coaching for Black women. If you are healing from past traumas, if you're exiting a toxic work environment, I would love to work with you. And yeah, I do have a community called Black Women Freelancers, which is the pathway I took out of a toxic job, becoming a freelancer, basically. And so creating a community, sharing resources about how to take that path. If you are current or aspiring, looking to grow your freelance business, it is a free community, Black Women Freelancers. Also on YouTube, Black Women Freelancers, if you'd like to join. And yeah, on Instagram, Marissa Price Heals, YouTube, Marissa Price Heals, and LinkedIn, Marissa Price MSW. Please connect with me. Great.
Well, thank you so much, Marissa. I really enjoyed your our discussion today and what you've shared. And I hope for everyone who's watching that this gives you some inspiration and some opportunities to find ways to connect with other Black women in healing spaces, whether online or in person or both. So I want to briefly talk about, in 2 weeks, I'm going to be doing a quarter one burnout check in. So, quarter one has been a lot. It
Yes,
has
it
been
has.
a lot. And so, I want to next, the 27th at 12 p.m. Central Time, to talk about some of the things that I'm noticing just this first quarter with burnout and how it's affecting people across the board, but especially Black women. Also, things to be aware of. So, if you have any like topics that you would love for me to dive into, or questions that you may have about what's happened this first quarter in terms of people's mental health and burnout and what's happening in the world, please send them to me. You can either like DM me on Instagram, or if you're looking at LinkedIn or YouTube, just dropping it in the comments. I would love to hear from you. But I think we need a community check in around this first quarter. I have encountered so many people, and this is, I mean, not just Black women who are shook right now and who are
Mhm.
trying to figure out how they're going to make it in a material sense, but also make it in a mental health, emotional, spiritual sense as well. So I want to have some time to talk about those things. So please join me on the 27th at 12 p.m. Central Time. Thank you, thank you, thank you again to Marissa Price for joining us for Moving Beyond Burnout. And please like the video. Please share this video with any woman that you know of right now who is looking for community, who wants to learn about how they can create their own communities of healing. And please subscribe to the YouTube channel, subscribe to Marissa's YouTube channel. I will send out a newsletter next week. So I have that information in the description box. And I send out this newsletter every 2 weeks to talk about what I focus on the channel, but also just things that we need to think about or really explore as it relates to well-being and burnout. So I hope that you all have a good rest of your Thursday and take care and be well.